Welcome everyone to this free webinar hosted by Youth Specialties. My name is Jacob Eckeberger. I'm on staff with YS and I have the privilege of connecting with youth workers from all across the US who have wisdom and experiences that we can all learn from. And today we're going to be learning from and leaning into Jason Matthews, who is one of our core YS blog authors. He's someone that I was introduced to about a year ago, I guess now, and he's been submitting content for the blog regularly since then. Really quality stuff. So you might recognize his name. So it'll be fun to put a little bit of his personality in front of you as well. And he's gathered a crew of youth workers who can speak into this conversation about how do we partner with parents in youth ministry. And so let's go around the virtual room so that everyone can get to know each of you and introduce yourself, and then share just a quick 30 seconds about you and your ministry. And let's start with Benjamin.
Cool. Yeah, so my name is Benjamin Deward, and I was a youth and worship pastor for 8 years at a church in Iowa. And then just over the last 2 years have moved my family across the country to Linden, Washington now, continuing doing youth and worship ministry for both the middle school, the high school, and obviously the worship ministry here too. So digging it, thankful to be here, and yeah, good group of guys we've got here today. I'm excited to be with them.
And my name's Brian Stewart, and I'm here in Linden as well. And I've been here at my church, Grace Baptist Fellowship, as the youth pastor for 12 years. But I attended here ever since I was a kid. So I have the pleasure of serving in my own home church, which has its benefits, but also its drawbacks, because I remember you when I was a squeaky little teenager. But I enjoy working with these guys. We have a great network that we get to partner with and work together on, and these guys are my allies and my resources, and excited to be here today to talk about using parents in youth ministry.
My name is Will Hicks. I am with a church in Linden called Victory Christian Fellowship, and I have been here for about 2 years. I was previously at a church in Bellingham, which is just south of us, about 20 minutes, and I've been in youth ministry for about 11 years. And I've had a little bit of experience, negative and positive, with parents, and excited to talk about some of those things. It can be challenging, but I really like what Jason brought with parents being allies, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Awesome. Sounds good, you guys. Thank you so much for jumping in and being a part of our discussion today. I'm just excited to be able to lead this. I've been working with students now for over 20 years. Here at Sunrise Baptist Church, which is located about 2 hours north of Seattle in Washington State. I also get to work closely with a local nonprofit called Be the One, which is a mentoring organization that partners adults in the community with students in one of our local middle school and high schools. And most of these students are either high risk or at risk kids. So I have a lot of opportunities to work with students and parents, not just within the church, but also outside of the church as well in our community. So when I started out in youth ministry, I was a young married guy with no kids of my own, as many of us were, right? And just this last week, our oldest daughter turned 18. So the perspective that I bring today is that of a youth pastor, but it's also as a parent with 3 of my own kids in the youth ministry here at our church. One of the things that I've noticed over the last several years is the amount of influence a parent has on their kids' spiritual and religious life. Now, I would say that some of that influence is positive, and some of that influence is negative. But it wasn't that long ago that the National Study of Youth and Religion came out, and one of their big conclusions in that study was that the single most important social influence on the religious and spiritual lives of students was their parents. Now, some of us may be surprised by that. I know some of us were back when that study came out, because as youth pastors, we kind of feel like that's on us to do. That we're the providers of that's what we get paid for, so to speak. But remember this, that parental influence can go both ways, that it can be both positive and negative. And so for our webinar today, we're going to be talking about having parents as allies in youth ministries. And we're going to start out by basically putting parents into two broad categories. The first category is the connected or the engaged parent. So these are the parents in our ministries that are actively and consistently involved in their kids' lives at some level. I mean, we all have those parents who are, they're faithful to meetings. They get their paperwork in on time. They know what's happening. But then we also have the disconnected or unengaged parent. And these are the parents who are pretty inactive. They're not very engaged, or they're pretty inconsistent in their kids' lives. And we have those parents as well. And those parents are that way for lots of reasons. But chances are good that we're going to have broader categories of parents represented in our youth ministries. And for better or for worse, both of these sets of parents or categories of parents have a huge impact on the religious and spiritual lives of their students. So the big question then is, how do we make both of these categories of parents allies in youth ministry? How do we work with these parents? Instead of making them enemies, instead of making them just bystanders, or even something that we fear, how do we make them allies? So I'll give you the short answer to that question, and that's this. I think we need to leverage their influence, and I think we need to gain their trust. So think about this. As youth workers, we can never underestimate the power of a parent's trust or the value of a parent's trust. Because when we have a parent's trust, our freedom to be the spiritual leaders that God has called us to be in a kid's life is going to grow exponentially. But if we don't have a parent's trust, we have very little freedom to lead. And I've learned that to be true on the positive and the negative in my years as a youth pastor. So let's dig into that though a little bit more. How do we do that? How do we leverage their influence, and how do we gain their trust? Today we're going to talk about three basic things that you can do to make parents allies in your youth ministry. And I'm going to start with to communicate with them. Seems kind of obvious, but it's very important. And this can happen in a lot of different ways. Social media, text messaging, phone calls, face-to-face. Whatever forms you use though, let me say this. We need to be consistent in our communication, and we need to be effective with our communication. When we're consistently communicating with parents, we're building their trust. They know that they can count on what's happening and to hear about what's happening because they know that we're out there communicating with them in whatever form that we use. And that's going to build trust over time. But here's the deal with communication. If we don't communicate effectively, we just end up adding to the noise of parents' lives. Like, think about this. Like, parents are bombarded with information all the time. They get it from the school, they get it from sports teams, they get it on their own social media accounts. There's just a lot of stuff that's just getting thrown at parents all the time. So we have to be very careful that our communication is effective, meaning that we're not just throwing messages at them constantly. That what we send to them is very important in terms of what we're trying to do, whether it's an event reminder, whether it's a change of plans, whether it's just like a, hey, here's what's happening. We have to be careful that we're effective in our communication. So panel, I'm going to give you guys a heads up, because in just a minute, I'm going to ask you guys how you communicate with your student ministries. I'd love to hear what's worked for you and what hasn't. But while you're thinking about that, let me just give you one example of communication that we do weekly. Generally speaking, we found that parents are still using email and Facebook regularly. Maybe not the students, but the parents are. So at the beginning of the week, which for me is Monday, I will send out a weekly email update, a weekly Facebook update. And it's basically, here's what's happening in our youth ministries this week. It'll include the meeting times. It'll include the places where we're meeting. It'll include basic info like, here's what we're going to be teaching on this week, or here's what we're going to be doing if it's more of an event-based night. Facebook too has also worked well for us in terms of this kind of communication, because Facebook provides a way for us to remind parents of upcoming events, or a deadline that's coming up, or any last-minute program changes. So that's one way that we really try to communicate with parents, and we try to be consistent and effective in that communication. But I'm curious now, panel, how about you guys? What forms of communication do you use with parents, and what ways have you been able to communicate consistently and effectively with them? Go ahead, jump in.
That's a good question. I appreciate how you started this too, just the idea of being allies, recognizing that family is God's idea. And so the parents are not the enemies. In fact, they're co-laborers with us, whether they're on board or not. So yeah, communication becomes extremely important. And to piggyback a little bit off what you said, I don't think it's possible to over communicate. Now, as long as it's effective, like you said, we don't want to bombard them, but you never have. I've never had a parent that said to me, you just communicate too much. It's always, why didn't I know, or why didn't I hear about this? And so knowing that has helped me in making sure that I over communicate in every available context. We're in a unique situation where we actually meet, our middle school ministry meets at a local elementary school. And probably of the 60 kids, maybe only 30 of them are from our church. So we have a lot of parents that I don't have regular contact with, that I'm trying to communicate with. So we found that the best context to be for those is in, like you said, in particular, Facebook, so the use of social media, even Instagram, to try and remind them of events and whatnot. We've tried the parent email thing. And for whatever reason, it hasn't seemed to stick with many, or it kind of gets lost in its effectiveness. But we found that for our context, that the constant healthy bombardment of social media has been an effective way to communicate that the big what's going on. Here's what we're doing. If you have any further questions, call me, that kind of a thing. But that seemed to work well for us.
It's good.
Yeah, I definitely, one thing that I've found is there's not one way that I have found to communicate. There's got to be multiple ways to try and overlap and talk to as many parents or get as much information as I can. And so, yeah, the Facebook, I've found Facebook has been really helpful with some students. A lot of parents, mainly middle school students, aren't on Facebook, or a lot of our middle school students aren't on Facebook. So that's been a way for us to communicate with parents. As well, email. Some parents don't want me emailing them. They've even said, like, please don't email me. I get a lot of emails already. And so just like Jason was talking about, parents are bombarded. And so one thing I was thinking about as Jason was sharing is what is effective communicating. And then Benjamin saying, we can't over communicate, but how can we be concise in our communication? And a few things that I've heard from parents is, as much as I appreciate it, your emails are too long. So like, what's wrong with 12 paragraphs of everything that's coming up? And I think that's why Jason's, once a week can seem extreme to some people, but at the same time, once a week keeps things in bite-sized portions, keeps them up to date. Then they're not overwhelmed with a bunch of information, and so I appreciate that. I've also found a lot of parents text really well, because a lot of their kids have text, and so just small little updates via text. I don't do my 5-paragraph text message parents. That's another way to get banned from being able to text parents. So, but text messaging has been a huge thing for me. In fact, last night I got a text message from a parent saying, my son's not doing well. Can you give him a call in the morning? And that was just amazing. It got right to me. And so because we've been able to establish that, that's worked really well. In terms of phone calls, everybody being so busy, it's real tough. So it's mainly like voicemail tag that we play with the phone. But yeah, that's communication for me. That's how I've done it.
Yeah, I've been unsuccessful with email and made a strong attempt to to build it, and used MailChimp, which gives me a lot of feedback on who's opening it, and found that, it was less than half that I would ever see actually opened it, actually ever looked at it. So I went to primarily a Facebook group, and a lot of you have been on Facebook. I don't know if you're just using your ministry pages to post stuff. I found that a Facebook parent group was very effective, because once they're in that group, they're automatically subscribed to every post. They can unsubscribe themselves, and some do, but you also now get a list of who's seen it. So you are given a lot of information from those Facebook groups now, and I think they're well set up. And yeah, parents are still on Facebook. We've seen kids disappear from Facebook, but parents are still there, and that's been the most effective thing I've seen. And I also add parents to my student text list that I blast out. Hey, youth group tonight, this is what's happening. So there are many parents that are on that list too, but mainly the Facebook. And I love the interaction I get, just a like or a comment, a question. I would never get anything back from my emails, but I get some interaction with the Facebook, seeing who's seen it. Some people like it, some people ask a question and a comment, and it's been healthy. There hasn't been any weird questions pop up that I wish wasn't public, but it's been great on Facebook groups.
I would just jump in again.
Good, guys.
Oh, can I
go ahead?
Just piggybacking off Will here a minute when he said, there's no one way to communicate. I think as youth pastors, it's important for us to recognize that. So even if we don't want to text, or even if we don't, recognizing, there may be only 3 parents who that's their form of communication. So we need to be willing to text, even if only 3 people are receiving that, and if 40 others are receiving this way. So it really, it was literally last week where I got called from the school, and they said, hey, we've got a function that we just last minute planned, so you don't have use of this facility. We won't be able to do your group. So I had to communicate to, a bunch of parents, many of who don't go to our church, in such a short window of time. And so we passed out little pieces of paper that kids took home. We sent texts. We did Instagram posts. We did Facebook posts. We did the group posts, and trying in every way, knowing that some will get this, some will get that, some won't see this, but some will see that. And so really, as youth pastors, having to kind of get involved in it all, whether we like it or not. And sometimes it takes more time, but recognizing it's worth it, and it's important, again, because you can't over communicate those kinds of things. So
yeah, that's really good stuff, you guys. And I appreciate, I like a couple takeaways for me from your comments was, one, Will, you talked about just like the length of our communication. I think, being able to be concise and clear in the things that we communicate is very important, because parents don't want to read our 12 paragraphs, right? But if we can be really clear and concise in what we're communicating, that goes a long way. And being creative in how we communicate, or using different ways of communicating as well. And you guys have even given me some ideas, being able to listen to what you guys do that I haven't really approached myself yet. So thank you for that. We're going to move on to the next way that we can make allies with parents in youth ministry. We talked about communication. The second thing I'd say today is that to meet with or to connect with them. Now, just like communication, this can happen in a lot of different ways. One way that I'm going to talk about here in a little bit more is with parent meetings. We've had mixed results with those, and we're going to get back to that here in a little bit. Just being available before or after youth group. It's amazing how much a 30-second, a 1 minute, a 2 minute, even a 5 minute conversation with a parent can have before or after youth group, how much that can go to building trust. Just being available for them. And then sometimes it's appropriate to take a parent out for coffee and to invest that time into that parent. Those can be good times as well. But whatever ways that you use to meet with parents, I just want to suggest 2 things. One, be intentional. Be intentional when you meet with parents, because when you are intentionally meeting with a parent, you are leveraging their influence, because what you're doing is you're saying, I value your presence. I value the role that you have in your kid's life. I value what you have to offer. And I'm not just here for your kid. So intentionality is huge. The second thing I would say is be available. Because when you're available, you're gaining their trust. If parents have a really hard time getting a hold of us, if we don't return their calls or text messages, if we're hard to find on a youth group night, for better or for worse, they're going to probably assume that we don't want to talk to them, you know, or that we're just too busy for them. So being available, I think, is really huge to building trust with a parent. So I'm going to throw out another question to you guys as a panel here in just a minute. And I'm going to give you the question, and then I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about with connecting with parents. What does meeting with parents look like in your youth ministries, and what's worked for you and what hasn't? So not just meeting with, but connecting with, I guess, would be another way to say that. So while you're thinking about that, let me share something with you guys right now that's not working for us right now. And I'm hoping you guys can give me some feedback on it as well. So parent meetings. We started doing parent meetings several years ago, and they started out really well. At these parent meetings, we would do lots of different things. We would provide resources for parents. We'd give them books that they could take home and check out. We would provide them with online resources, websites that were good to go to for parents. We would take a look at our quarterly youth ministry calendar. We'd go over the upcoming events, or like the teaching series that we'd be going into. We would even tackle maybe a current cultural topic and have some open discussion about things that were relative to teens and parents at that time. Anything from, you know, cell phone use to media to all sorts of stuff. So this year, though, we're not doing parent meetings. And the reason is because it seems like parents have lost interest. Our numbers of those who would come was dropping. And the ones who came were the same ones who came every year, or every quarter, I should say. So right now we're in an evaluation period where we're trying to figure out, do these work? Should we be doing parent meetings? What's the best way to connect with parents, maybe on a larger scale than just a one-on-one, or you know, having a conversation with them over Facebook or whatever it is. So here's the question, panel. What does meeting with parents or connecting with parents look like for you guys? What's worked and what hasn't? And I'd love your feedback on parent meetings. What do you guys think? Who's going first?
Do we have to go in order?
No, we don't.
Yeah, I think you got to go in order, Benjamin. I'll start. What has worked? I'm gonna play this tune over and over. One thing does not work. I've found there are some things with communication or meeting with parents that works and doesn't work. And so some parents want to meet one-on-one, other parents don't have time for it, or don't see the point in it. So I have met with parents one-on-one, set up time, especially when I started at the church that I'm at now. I wanted to meet parents and coming in new, and so I set up time. Some parents just weren't able to make it, but I was able to get through most of the parents. And so I really think in terms of meeting with parents, what I found is, I loved what Jason said, being available before and after youth group. I am guilty of being so busy. I'm like, oh, I got to get everything all set. And so, 5 minutes before youth group, I'm finally able to, break free. And then after youth group, I've got my mind set on making sure everything's tore down, or I'll be playing a game with kids nowhere near where parents are coming to pick them up. And so I think, yeah, an intentionality in that area is a big one, because, crossing paths with parents. The other area, because I would say about half of our parents come to our church, meeting during our fellowship time has been huge. That has been so helpful. And parents actually open up and share stuff. And sometimes I'm like, your kid's right there. They can hear what you're saying, but they don't, but it's been good. And so it's, I guess, yeah, making yourself available, as Jason was saying. I think another thing, building trust with parents, I wanted to say is, showing up to things. When parents tell you something that is going on in their kid's life, showing up to that thing, it means a lot to the kid, but I think in a lot of ways it displays to the parents that their family matters and that their student matters and you're prioritizing. So that's one big thing that I learned early that I've multiple times had to come back to: show up, or at least follow up if you can't show up, that I wanted to add on there.
Good.
Yeah, that was good, Will. I piggybacked the sporting events in my mind, and this may be terrible for youth pastors to hear, is actually less about the students and more about the parents, because most of our students there have their parents at these games. And when you use the phrase connections, Jason, I think that's so appropriate, because it doesn't have to be this long drawn out period. It can be something as simple as, hey, how are you doing? Good to see you. Act interested in their life too, not just their students' life. And so these points of connection just happen almost in little sound bites, which is kind of a theme that I'm hearing, that parents don't want these long emails. They don't necessarily have time for these long meetings, but just these constant reminders that I care about you, I care about your kids. How are you doing? One thing that I've found to be very effective is affirming them as parents because of their kids. So just shooting a Facebook message, hey, here's what your boy did this past week. I was really proud of him, and just, you guys are doing a fantastic job, and I'm so thankful to be part of this with you. Little things like that go an incredibly long ways as far as building that trust and some of that relational equity that you were talking about, Jason. So when I think of parent connections, we don't do parent meetings. We don't bother with some of those big things just because of the turnouts and those kinds of things. But I try to make it a very intentional point at having just these little connections throughout. So you mentioned, Will, after youth group, getting stuck kind of playing games. I make it a point to make sure my leaders are playing the games with the kids, and I'm out greeting the parents, as they put the window down and we're sending their kids out. Hey, have a good week. Thanks for bringing Jimmy here tonight, that kind of thing. So little connections throughout the week that just affirm my presence in their life and my presence in their students' lives, their kids' lives. I've seen to be very an effective way to kind of build that relational equity.
It's good.
I haven't done parent meetings in a long time, and I'm actually being asked to start up parent meetings again. So I was hoping for some feedback from you guys about how awesome parent meetings were and all the things I've been missing. We're about to start doing parent meetings again. I go into those feeling a little apprehensive and a little, just being on the spot to questions. And honestly, I wish that some of the conversation I have had at a parent meeting would be one-on-one, where they're bringing up a complaint or something, and it seems to create more drama sometimes and that's from 10 years ago, and probably why I haven't done parent meetings since, because it's just been a little scary. But I'm hoping to do a parent meeting at a set time, a short time, during, like, replacing something else during our Sunday morning, during the Sunday school hour, something that I have to carve out time. I've just found as people get busier, you can't just add something to the schedule. You gotta pull something back to prioritize something else. So whether it's once a quarter, pull them out of their Sunday school classes and gathering together at that time and getting, someone to teach my Sunday school class, just, creating that time out of time that they're already present, I think will be the one thing that may make my parent meetings attended, rather than adding an extra night out and something, trying to find the right night, going to be nearly impossible.
Yeah, that's good, Brian. I think there's no magic formula to how we come up with a perfect parent meeting. I think that there's a lot of factors that we're up against that you raised, whether it's busyness or just the fear that we have as youth pastors to open up a can of worms that we don't want to open. Those are all things that thefinitely play into whether or not we do that. And also, like what Benjamin brought up as well, there's a lot of families, a lot of kids that come from families whose parents don't even go to our churches. And so the likelihood of them coming to a parent meeting, at least in my experience, is pretty small. So those are all factors. I think if we can maybe lower our expectations in the sense of not thinking that we're going to have a room full of parents of 40 parents, but maybe think more in terms of I'm going to set up kind of like a cozy area where I can talk to 10, 12, 15 parents, and it's more just kind of like sitting around tables, so that you're not just kind of the one that's standing up in front of everybody and feeling like you're a big old target. Because sometimes I think we can do that in youth ministry, where we set up the room and the meeting time to kind of be let's go, make the youth pastor feel uncomfortable with either hard questions or things that we want to complain about. So I think environment is big. I think the timing of it, like you said, Brian, is really important. And I think even personal invites might be something. I haven't tried those yet, but personal invites might be something that be worth considering. You know, getting parents that you know are big influencers, or that you know are you know, your biggest cheerleaders. You know, getting them to be a part of that, and utilizing their leverage in that process. So
I would like to see, like you're talking about, an open format where I'm not presenting a bunch of stuff, but more that I'm there to listen. And I don't know how that'll work or how that'll go, but I could see that being much more beneficial, where parents are bringing things to me, ideas to me, concerns, questions, and we can have more of an open discussion rather than a bunch of stuff I'm presenting. I see value in sharing things about our culture and wanting to be informed, but I'd rather be responsive to parents' questions maybe, rather than me bringing everything because I'm the expert, but listening to them might be a better approach.
I think what Jason was saying in terms of talking to parents, I think one thing that can be really effective, and this has happened in the past, is I got a couple of parents and asked them, how do you feel about these meetings? And from those conversations, I actually got parents that developed buy-in to the meetings, had some things that they wanted to talk about. And so talking to them beforehand and saying, here, you know, how do you feel about this? In some ways, those parents kind of led a portion of that meeting or helped influence the buy-in with the other parents. And so I think in some ways, kind of, I guess, developing buy-in one-on-one, as Jason was saying, you know, getting that set before the meeting, then you're not bombarded with a bunch of angry parents with, you know, pitchforks. And so.
Yeah, and this is all good stuff. I think just for sake of time, we need to move on to our next point. And hopefully we'll still have some time at the end there to ask some more questions here. Good one there, Benjamin. I saw that. So we've talked about communicating with parents. We've talked about meeting or connecting with them. The last point we want to talk about today in terms of making parents allies in youth ministry is including them. Now, just like the first two things we've talked about, this can happen in a lot of different ways. And I just want to give you some examples from our experience. In the church that I serve in, we don't have a church bus. We don't have any church vans of any kind. So one way that I can include parents, and that I need to include parents, is have them drive to events or to retreats, things like that. Parents can also host a small group or a barbecue. That's another way to get parents included. I've had parents help with special events where I've needed maybe food or just needed some extra help for a particular event. I've even invited parents to go on a mission trip with their student as well. And in our context, that's actually been a big win for us. But all that to say, including parents in your youth ministries doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. I think sometimes we think, well, if parents are going to be involved, then we have to make them leaders. And as we all know, not all parents make good leaders. And there's lots of reasons for that, right? So I would say two things, though, in terms of how you include parents in your youth ministries. One is be selective of the parent. And what I mean by that is, for those of us who have parents that aren't involved in the church, who are kind of disconnected, maybe even from their own kid, don't even know if they're a Christian or not, obviously they're not going to make a good small group leader. But they potentially could be a great person who could drive a bunch of kids up to a laser tag night or to the a bowling night or just some activity. You can include those parents in your youth ministries at that level. Another thing I would say though too is that we need to be respectful of the student. Some students are totally fine with having their parents around, and it doesn't bother them. Other students are uncomfortable or just don't like having mom or dad at a youth group night or driving to a youth group activity. So I think it's really important that as we talk about involving parents, that we're selective in terms of what we ask parents to do, depending on who they are, and that we're respectful of the student first. That we have that conversation with the student beforehand. Hey, I'm going to ask your mom or dad if they'll do this. What do you think? And get their feedback on that. I think that's important. But including parents in your youth ministries, I believe, can be huge in terms of leverage and trust. And so panel here, in just a second, I'm going to throw it back to you to talk about how you've included parents in your youth ministries. What's worked for you and what hasn't, and what do you see are the biggest obstacles that we face as youth pastors and youth workers when it comes to including parents. But while you're thinking about that, let me just share one way that we include parents in our youth ministries. Throughout the year, we intentionally plan just hangout nights at students' houses. And these nights take the place of our regular program youth group nights. So we're not adding another night to the calendar. We're not adding something to the week. It's replacing it. And we've already talked about that earlier in terms of just how busy people are. So sometimes those nights will include an event like a Super Bowl party. Most of the time, those nights are going to include food, like a summer barbecue. But all the time, those nights include hanging out with students. And for me, including the parents in what we're doing. Whether it's providing food, whether it's just being present there, it's giving me an opportunity to connect with them on their home turf. So these nights are very high in relationships and very low on programming. And we've found them to be super effective for leveraging parents and building their trust. Now, how this is going to work in your youth ministry is going to depend on the size and culture of your ministry. For example, if you have a very large youth ministry program, a summer barbecue at a parent's house is probably a little much. But you can accomplish much of the same thing if you have a parent host a weekly small group, or parents host a weekly small group. You can still get on their home turf. You can still be leveraging their influence. You can still be including them in what you're doing in a youth ministry by doing that. So panel, I'm going to throw it back to you, and I'm going to ask you guys, so how do you include parents? What's worked for you and what hasn't, and what are some of the biggest obstacles you've faced when trying to include them?
I do the similar things with events and drivers and extra help. I think that's great, but the most regular way we've included parents is we've gone to a every other week meeting together as a large group, and on the other week, Sunday nights, meeting together as small groups. And those small groups meet in students' homes, and the parents are the hosts. So our regular youth group leaders are leading the discussions and the programming of that night, but our parents are the hosts, and they're providing the snacks, and that they're not directly involved. A lot of times parents will split to the other living room or basement, or they'll go up to their room and watch a show, and kind of disconnect themselves from the meeting. Some of them are around more, but they're observing the ministry. They're getting to take part. They're getting to be a host and to see their kids interact with their friends. And it's a good level, I think, of one step away from direct involvement, but still getting to observe the ministry that's happening and see the relationships and the growth that's happening, and to get to know their students' friends and see what the ministry is doing in a very kind of direct way, and serving the ministry by providing the snacks and the place to be. And I think that's been the best use of parents' involvement that I've done over the last few years.
It's good.
I think my greatest barrier is myself. And unfortunately, it's taken almost 10 years of youth ministry to realize how many parents actually want to bless and to give of their time, or to give of their finances, to give of their resources, to give of their space. And really, for me, I'm just now kind of getting into that and recognizing that parents want to be part of that, and they want to be able to bless our group. And so, I kind of lived earlier on with the guilt that, well, it's my job, it's my responsibility, I have to provide, I have to find the space, I have to do those kinds of things. But and all the while, I've got parents, hey, if you need anything, let me know. If you need anything, let me know. And okay, we're okay, thanks. We're okay, thanks. And now to recognize that I've actually been robbing them of the opportunity to be able to be part of the ministry, even if it is in kind of a disconnected way. So if I have a parent ask, and hey, if you need anything, I try to make it a point within the next couple weeks to actually say, here's one way that you can help, or how about just make some brownies for this night, or those kinds of things. And it's helped all around. I mean, it's given them an opportunity to be involved and to serve. It gives me freedom and release. And again, like you said, it builds this trust and this unity and this growth that we're trying to establish with the parents. So for me, it's kind of like the aha moment just this past year, and I'm loving it. It's great.
It's good.
Yeah, it's definitely, I appreciate your honesty, Benjamin, because, I think we're all like, yes, there is a resource there, and we want to connect with our parents. And so there is a difference between communicating with them and helping, I guess, or getting out of the way to help them get involved in the youth ministry. And I think there is a desire there, but being that, parents are different, or different gifting and different, some of the things that I found is when a parent asks, is there anything that I can do? I'll typically ask, well, what are some things that is on your heart or you're thinking that you would like to do? And so there are a lot of parents that say, hey, I've got a car, I would be willing to drive. We do have parents that bring snacks, but this is definitely an area, as we are talking, that I'm like, I need to work on this. I need to work on this, and I need to be intentional with it. And so, but I would say, as Benjamin's saying, when parents do come, if you ever need anything, but I'm the guy that's like, I don't really go to them and ask. I don't follow up with them and sit and give them that opportunity. So thank you for the honesty, Benjamin, and yeah, robbing them of the opportunity to serve. So yeah, sorry, I'm less helpful. My bad.
No, that's good stuff, you guys. I think that I was definitely at that point too early on in youth ministry, where I kind of took more of a Lone Ranger approach, where I got this, I can do this. This is what you pay me for, and realized though that that parents do have a lot to offer, and for the reasons that we've talked about today, it's really important to involve them in appropriate ways, and in ways that they're able to offer. That's good for them as parents, and also good for their students who are in the ministry. So I'm open to any more questions. It looks like we're getting a little low on time, Jacob. So I want to just kind of throw it back your way, and however you want to wrap this up, let's go for it.
Yeah. So the last thing I'd love to ask the panel, if y'all are okay with maybe sharing a few tools or resources that you've used to communicate to parents. I know that I think, Brian, you mentioned that at one point you used MailChimp for emails. Are there any sort of mass texting platforms that you all use, or anything else like that would be good sort of tangible takeaway ideas that people could go and research if they're looking for some new tools?
I use this app called Mass Text Message, but I don't recommend it. It seems to be deleting contacts from my list at random times. So I'm actually looking for a new text messaging app, so I'd love to hear of one.
I was told by a buddy about this app called Ministry Hub. It's like $10. MinHub is the other thing, and so it's on I think Android and on Apple. And so, but MinHub, and it does a few things. I've entered the information, but I have yet to try the texting feature on it. So I've been worried that something might happen, or I might get that privilege of texting parents revoked. So I don't want to. I'm a little reluctant to try it, but I've heard from quite a few other youth pastors that they have used this, that they like it, that it works well for communicating really quick. But it is intensive. You've got to put all the information in there. But the other thing that it does do is it gives an opportunity for taking attendance. It produces statistics and stuff in terms of student staff ratios, and lets you know birthdays, gives you updates on birthdays and notifications for that. So it's a pretty sweet little app. I've been using it for a couple months here, but once again, haven't used the text messaging, so I can't speak to that.
Yeah, we use MinHub exclusively here. You can create groups, which allows the texting feature. You don't have to do mass text. You can, but you can also do small groups, or you can tailor it to your needs. And it's life-changing for us. I'd suggest everyone to invest in that. $10. I'll give you 10. Well, no, I won't do that. But you can get $10 to buy the app, because it's legit. It's legit. And for parents too, you get the parent contact information all involved in there as well. So yeah, it's great. We love it.
That's great.
That's awesome. Yeah,
stuff,
well,
guys.
a huge thanks to Jason for leading our discussion today on parents as allies in youth ministry, and for bringing along the wisdom of Benjamin, Brian, and Will to speak into this. It's been really helpful for lots of different ways. I've been getting some text messages from some folks that are watching that didn't want to ask questions right on there, but they wanted to send it to me. So those last questions about tools were really from them. One final announcement before we sign off. For those of you who are watching this, don't forget that the YS 101 Collaborative is kicking off in April. Brian Abbey, who is our director of YS Search and YS Coaching, has organized this 7-month collaborative learning environment for any youth worker that's in their first 1 to 3 years of youth ministry. So that launches April 24th and 25th with a retreat in Dallas. You stay connected with your collaborative group through online meetings each month, and then it culminates in a final gathering at NYWC this year in Memphis in November. And that's included in the price for the 101. So it's a pretty amazing resource. We're excited about it. Visit yscoaches.com for more info. And with that said, thanks to everyone that was watching, and we hope that you plan to join us for our next free online discussion the last Thursday of the month in April. We'll be covering assessing suicide risks and next steps for high-risk students. So it's going to be tough conversations, but really, really good and important ones. All right, so we will see you then. Bye.